Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Monday edition of our February webinar series, which is all about getting ahead of the growth opportunity in China. We have a tremendous amount of companies that are interested in the Chinese market, are looking to approach the Chinese market, but are trying to figure out how they can protect their businesses and get the ball rolling. So we've developed this webinar series with 5 different topics all around the idea of protecting your business and getting the communication process and the transparency and clarity around a lot of the administrative measures that need to happen as you're entering the Chinese market. Before we start today's session, I just want to highlight that when you are trying to get ahead of the growth opportunity in China, you have to prepare yourself. I talk to too many clients or companies who are not interested in doing the research, in getting data and having valuable data at the fingertips to make decisions, but getting also clarity and transparency around how China works from an administrative perspective and just generally on how to do business. If you have the ability to prepare yourself, you will have the ability to get ahead of the growth opportunity in China. If you do not prepare yourself, you will hit obstacles, roadblocks all along the way. Now, before we start today's session, just a couple of technical slides. And bear with me as I have caught a cold. It's not COVID related, it's just the flu. How the webinar works is that we're here to educate you. As people are rolling into the room, I'll be adding them in. But it's just to say, this is a free forum. It is a complimentary webinar. We're here to educate you on what we do on a daily basis. If you've got questions, insert them into the chat box. When it comes to China, for me, there is no dumb question. Ask away. The philosophy is this is going to be a 60-minute time spent. It's your time. It's valuable. So use it wisely. And again, don't hesitate to ask any questions. We'll have a Q&A at the end, and it will be a first come, first serve principle. We do use Zoom meetings. So I cannot help you if you run into any technical issues on your end. My only suggestion would be log off, log back in with the same URL. If I run into any technical issues, which today shouldn't happen, it usually takes me about 1 minute to 2 minutes to reboot the system, but I will be coming back on to finish today's presentation. The webinar is for you if you are a newbie to China or if you're a startup to China. So it's really for those of you that are looking to gain a China education on how to enter the China market. You're trying to tick off all the boxes to prepare yourself for what's about to happen. And even those of you that have been transacting with China for 1 to 3 years, and you're really trying to understand now whether it makes sense to have an on-the-ground structure or even headcount, a lot of the topics we're going to be talking about this week is all about prepping yourself for that next step, for that additional phase of going into China. So if you're watching this live right now, or if you're watching this on replay, don't hesitate to let me know who you are. Are you a newbie? Are you a startup? Give me a little bit of background on what you're planning on doing in China. That always helps me to understand who my audience is and how my audience is also growing. So the webinar series plan for this week is that today we'll be talking about how to save your brand in China. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the China Incorporation Blueprint, which is all about what you need to do to prepare yourself for actually incorporating an entity in China. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking about how to start your business with your China accountant. Now, for many of you that are actually just looking to transact with China, this is still applicable to you because you should be keeping a separate P&L for China, even if this is done out of your HQ, which means that there are going to be certain individuals in the finance team in the HQ that will be geared towards the China business. And whether you have an entity on the ground in China or whether you're actually transacting simply direct from your HQ, you should have a China accountant on board, somebody who's responsible for that China business, who's going to help you to analyze the numbers and look at them specifically on how you can improve them on a day-by-day, month-by-month, year-on-year basis. Session 4 is going to be, which is Thursday, which is all about how to recruit and hire your first employees, particularly during COVID times, where you can't actually travel to China. and interview people face to face. So how do you find people? What methods are there, and how do you actually hire those first employees? And session 5 is going to be about choosing the right people for your corporate management structure. Now, again, it's all about getting ahead of the growth opportunity in China, and you need to have the right people sitting next to you, guiding you, mentoring you, who already have experience doing business in China, to make sure you're on the right path, and that you're not going to be taking 5 steps back because you're constantly hitting obstacles and roadblocks, but that you're continuously moving forward and scaling up at the speed that you wish to scale at. So that's the program for this week. A little bit about myself. There's only going to be one speaker this week. My name's Christina Kohler-Coluccia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. For the last 17, 18 years, I've been focused on inbound investment into China. I've worked with over 500 companies on their expansion strategies, as well as their implementations in the Chinese market. And something that really interests me at the moment is helping these companies to scale up and grow and eliminate the most common obstacles and road paths that get along their way. One thing that I've learned in the last 17, 18 years is that we truly have gone from the wild, wild west of China when I first arrived. It would have been even more wild, wild west prior to that, but I did arrive in 2003. All the way today, where China in itself, when you look at the government and its administrative processes, whether it's the tax bureau, whether it's the Ministry of Commerce, they have streamlined the processes that you are not just winging it. There's a defined step-by-step procedure with everything. And this is where we have created now certain methodologies, which I'm going to highlight in this week, to get you out of that growth opportunity so that you realize there are these processes and that you can create standard operating procedures within your organizations to make sure you don't run into the simplest of problems that can cost you a fortune to repair and fix, like I had to go to when I first arrived in China. And last but not least, before we start today's presentation, if you have not received our ebook on the 10 biggest mistakes companies make in China, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can email me at christina@woodburnglobal.com. It's a complimentary ebook we're offering. These are my opinions of the 10 biggest mistakes companies make in China. I'm sure others will have further opinions, but really it's all about leadership traits. The leaders, the general managers that are responsible for the China business and what they tend to do wrong going into China. So that's what I've focused on. If you'd like a free copy, like I said, just email me. So how to save your brand in China is today's topic. Now, I did a video in this morning highlighting this topic, trying to get people to come on, further people to come on to the webinar. Whether you are looking to transact in China or get into the Chinese market in 2022, or whether you're trying to get into China and expand into the Chinese market in the next 5 to 10 years, protecting your brand is fundamental. And it's time sensitive. I cannot emphasize how time sensitive it is. Without understanding what brand assets you're going to be using in China and not getting them registered, which I know is a very bureaucratic and administrative measure, it can lead you to not doing business in China, because there are people like IP squatters, IP hijackers, just simple individuals who have heard of your brand, heard of its success abroad, and register it themselves. And then you have to go through a legal procedure to try and get it back, or you have to think about rebranding. Now, in order to simplify everybody's life, why not just go that easy route of registering whatever brand assets you are core to your business and eventually add on based on the new assets you might be using later on? Why don't you just simply register them? Again, it's just a very simple bureaucratic administrative procedure. And you can't imagine the number of companies that I have actual one-to-one conversations with who, for all intents and purposes, are ready to get their brands registered, their brand assets registered tomorrow. how it becomes something that's put on a back burner. And then you don't get another contact until 9, 10, 12 months, 2 years later, where they say, oh, well, Christina, we've forgotten about it. We want to register now. Or actually, our cash flow was tight. We didn't want to spend money on that. Now we want to do it. Well, in over 50% of those cases, when we do another research to check whether the brand name is available, you find out somebody's already taken it. And then it becomes a whole nother situation on how to actually save your brand. So I'm a big believer in being preemptive, being proactive. And since this is really a cheap and not cash intensive process, why not do it tomorrow? So again, I just want to reiterate, it doesn't matter if you're coming into China in 2022, or whether you're planning on doing that in 10 years, in 2032. You need to save your brand today. And first of all, check that it's available, because maybe you don't even know if it's available or not. So that's just my brief intro to this topic. But what we will be covering today is overall what is considered a trademark in China, the trademark database, the first to file system, considerations for registering your trademark. We're going to look at trademark hijackers, IP squatters, who should be registering their brand, why, and what should be your trademark strategy. And we'll also touch on the e-commerce side of things, because that is the tendency of most people, is that they want to get into the e-commerce world in China. So why should you be concerned by protecting your brand in China? And I just want to emphasize here, I deal with China on a day-to-day basis. China is my jurisdiction. That's what I know. But anybody who is expanding into any new market, regardless of whether it's just China or whether it's India, the US, Latin America, wherever, you should actually be registering your brand and protecting your brand, regardless of the activities you're going to be performing there. Okay. Brand protection is actually the number one thing you should be doing as you are going into a new market. Now, as like any other jurisdiction, there are unethical individuals that reside there who will make a buck in order to, who want to earn a buck. And so we'll do something a little bit devious. We call those in China IP squatters and IP hijackers. But very simply, this could be any individual that crosses your path. Supplier, customer, agent, employee. It could be anybody in your world that goes ahead to register your brand in China. And obviously they're doing it unethically. And I want to stop everybody. I don't want to hear the comments and say, oh, well, that's China. In China, everybody's bad and everybody's going to do something bad. This happens all over the world. Okay. I know people in the US who make a living off of registering domain names and then sell it off to brands. So people make a living out of this, right? And quite frankly, in the China perspective, if you don't make this a priority, it is nobody's fault but yours. You are leaving your brand out for somebody to take it. Okay, because literally anybody could register it. And again, what I want everybody to do is I want you to understand, how much is your brand worth to you? You have invested time, energy in building a brand around your business. And every single company has a financial value associated with its brand. It can be anywhere from 10 to 50% of the net worth of the business is associated with the brand. So why wouldn't you initiate this activity of just registering it in the jurisdictions that you plan on entering into and you plan on doing business in? Now, you might all think there's a financial component to this, but if you don't ask for quotations to understand actually how much it really costs to register a trademark, then you're not doing your full preparation. Remember, I said earlier, prepare yourself for the growth opportunity. You're not doing the right preparation to understand how much it all costs. You might surprise yourself and realize it's only a couple $100 US. So again, evaluate how much is your brand worth to you. And when you go into a market, let's talk China, but it could be anywhere in the world. It could be Brazil, could be India, could be Russia. How much is your brand worth to you? Do you want to maintain it? Do you want to use those brand assets that you've already created to build up your business? So trademarks in China. What is considered a trademark in China? It's basically any visual sign. And I tend to be able to relate to things with actual examples. So I'm going to use Woodburn as an example here. We have a logo, we have words, right? We have a design mark, which is the circle, and we actually have a word mark, which is the words that are being used. And then we have the combination of the both, which is the design and the word together. Now, in reality, if you want full protection, you would register the design mark, you would register the word mark, and the combination of the two to be fully protected. But of course, it depends on very much internally within your organization, where do you place your value? Now at Woodburn, we place our value on our name. Woodburn Accountants and Advisors reflects us, it reflects what we do. The nice little design mark is just a design mark. If somebody were to take it and we weren't able to use it anymore, it wouldn't bother us. It's just something that's pretty that we like to have on there. So our decision-making process at the time was purely to register Woodburn Accountants and Advisors as the word mark. We saved money on that, but ultimately you can decide to do all three applications if you wish. So when you are going into the Chinese market, it's really important to understand where these brand assets are going to be displayed. Is it going to be displayed on Chinese social media? Will it be displayed on marketing material that's sent out to customers? Will it be on a Chinese website? Will it be on service agreements and contracts? You have to evaluate. Will it be if you're producing garments? Will the label have these marks on there? Will the packaging have these marks on there? Where will these marks actually be displayed? Okay. And it's very good to take a pen and paper and list all of this out. All right. If you have already registered your trademarks in your home jurisdiction, which I hope everybody has done, then you can also take that registration as a template of what you need to cover for the Chinese market. All right. That's just an easier solution. But it's important to evaluate what you're going to register. Now, who should register their trademark in China? And I've listed here a whole series of companies. If you're a trading company in China, manufacturing, service, if you've got a China rep office, if you just have a person on the ground that's doing a temporary liaison office or a temporary marketing office, or very simply, if you're an overseas company with no subsidiary in China and you're transacting with China or talking to people in China, if you're about to market yourself in China, or if you have representatives of your company that are traveling in and out of China, you should be registering your trademark. I didn't add on here, but if you're attending trade shows that are associated with China or meeting people at trade shows that are doing something with China, you need to register your company. In brief, everyone that is doing business in or with China should be registering their trademark. And I want to highlight, and I'll be touching on case studies at the end. I want to highlight on this because there are misperceptions out there where people make the assumption, I'm only producing in China, I'm not selling, so I won't have any marketing initiatives, so I don't need to register my trademark. False. That is a false perception to have. Whatever you are doing in China, you should be registering your trademark. If you're communicating with people about what you're planning on doing in China and what your intentions are for China, you should be registering your trademark. If you are a brand and your ambition is to become a global brand, you should be registering your trademarks in all of the key jurisdictions. And China is one of those, to protect yourself. So one of the actions that we ask everybody to do, predominantly because they've waited so long, is to do a search in the trademark database before filing for the registration. Searching in the trademark database is not a requirement. It is not something that is mandatory to do as part of the process of the trademark registration. It is just something that we encourage and recommend companies to do, to understand how many similar types of names there are in the classes that you wish to register under. To give you then a percentage of success. Nobody can give you a guarantee of success. It is impossible, but it's to give you a percentage of success on whether you will be able to register your mark and be successful in registering it. In addition to that, it is to understand whether somebody has copied your mark, or ultimately stolen it, hijacked it, squatted it, however you want to call it, so that you know what then your next action plan is. Why do I say to do this search first? It's because you don't want to do the trademark registration filing and then have to wait 9 months only to then realize somebody has either taken it or registered it or squatted it, or realizing that there are too many similar marks and you didn't take any action in adjusting it. Okay. So you need to know, you have to create a game plan for this. You need to know where you stand prior to actually doing the registration. So then the next is the first to file system. In China, when you're registering your trademarks, it is a first to file system. So regardless of how popular your brand is in the UK, in Germany, in the US, in Canada, it has nothing to do with China. Okay. Your requirement is that if China is a market that is of interest to you, you need to register it ASAP, immediately. Anyone can lay claim to it. Anyone can take it. Okay. And if somebody takes it and registers it, ultimately what it means is that you're locked out of China with that brand asset. Okay. So you need to take that all into consideration. And this is why I'm saying, for those of you that are not thinking of expanding even this year, but maybe in 10 years, this is something you should focus on now, because you have 10 years where somebody could actually lay claim to it. Now, considerations for registering your trademark, and I hope this is then a template for what everybody's strategy should be when registering their brands in China. One is choosing what you want to register, okay? Understanding what brand assets you've got, understanding which of those brand assets you want to register, understanding whether you're going to create a Chinese name for your brand, and whether you then want to register that Chinese name. What you do have to avoid is things like cities, countries, Chinese presidents. I mean, there's a list of things you should avoid putting into your name, but ultimately everything else goes, okay? But again, what I want to highlight is you should do a trademark search to then know what is available, okay? The next is understanding in which classes and subclasses of goods and services you're going to register. In China, there are 45 classes. Actually, in almost every country, there's 45 classes. Although there are slight differentiations between jurisdictions, you can always take the template that you have in your home jurisdiction and use that for China, okay? There will be slight nuances and differences that you have to take into consideration. But you have to choose your classes and subclasses. So if you're, going into China, it's understanding, taking again a pen and paper and understanding the activities you're going to be performing in China. Are you going to be doing marketing initiatives? If so, where? Are you going to be putting the brand assets on your products? If so, is it also going to be on the product plus the packaging plus the cartons? How is that all going to look, right? So you've got to do that analysis. And that will then lead you to the classes and subclasses. The next is, again, searching that the trademark is available. It's then choosing which entity will own the trademark, okay? Will it be your HQ? Will it be a holding company? Will it be your China company? Not that I recommend that, but it's also a possibility. And then you go ahead and do your registration. So ultimately, you have 4 steps that you've got to do, okay? This is not something that takes hours on end. This is a pretty quick and swift process to evaluate these 4 steps, okay? And then you go ahead and register your trademark. Now, who are the enemies? Ultimately, anybody is an enemy, okay? But we've got in China trademark hijackers, which are local Chinese businesses that register a trademark in China, which is then owned by somebody else in another jurisdiction. And they're doing it because they're feeding off of the success of that brand in the other location, okay? And their demands are basically, they either want to earn licensing fees or they want to sue for infringement, okay? Now, this form of hijacking basically is going to tarnish your image. It's going to, you don't know what they're going to do with it. They could either be very silent and just want money from you, or they could actually really literally go on social media, and because they own your brand, they could tarnish your image in China. And then you need a completely new strategy for the Chinese market. The other is the IP squatters. Okay. And IP squatters are those where they see that you're building up success abroad. They can see that China is not a market you're planning on getting into right now. And they squat on your IP very quietly until you do finally decide to go into China. All right. And they're basically holding the value of that brand and they want money from you. Right. Either they want to sell it at a great profit or they want to earn licensing fees over the business that you're going to be doing. So there's going to be a licensing agreement with them. And then it could be anybody else. It could literally be your employee in the UK and Germany that goes off, finds a provider, spends a couple €100 and registers the mark in China. So it could be literally anybody. Now, if somebody owns your IP in China, what does this mean for you? Literally, it means that it's illegal for you to sell any goods or services bearing the trademark or these brand assets in China. It's illegal for you to manufacture or source goods from China bearing those brand assets. It's illegal for you to provide a service locally bearing those trademarks. So if you have a service agreement locally with somebody and that has your brand name on it, it's not allowed. It's illegal for you to market yourself in China bearing those brand assets. Likely, you can also have your products seized by customs because they will see it as counterfeit goods. And it basically means that the Chinese registrant is free to manufacture goods under that brand, under those brand assets and export them. Now, obviously, they can't export them to your country if you registered the brand assets there, but they can export it to any other country where you haven't registered your brand assets. Okay. So we need people to be aware of this. Now, what is your brand? What should your trademark strategy for China look like? And I'm specifically going on e-commerce platforms here, but it's really associated with anybody who's got significant value put on their brand assets. All right. So the first step ultimately is to conduct a search. Obviously, you first have to evaluate what brand assets you want to register, what classes and subclasses, and then you go and do the registration. The search. So you'd conduct a search to see whether it's available. If there are no problems, then you file as soon as possible. Okay, and it's a pretty straightforward process. The third step is engaging a monitoring service. Now, why do I say we should be engaging a monitoring service? Well, ultimately, because you want to see whether your brand is already being promoted or used online elsewhere. And this monitoring service is utilized for all the social media platforms, but also on the e-commerce platforms. Okay. You need to be ahead of the game. Again, I'm a big believer in preparation, right? And to be prepared, obviously, there are going to be cases where you have to spend money. But if you don't engage a monitoring service to see whether your brand is already being promoted, used online in a negative way, or inferring that actually your products and services are inferior, this is going to impact your entire China strategy and you won't be able to scale up. And you won't even know why. So the monitoring service, I think, is critical for anybody. And then you've got, especially in e-commerce, you have the ability to adopt an online brand protection strategy and invest in certain technology that you keep in-house to do that monitoring. So you can first outsource the work, but ultimately there is the technology that you can purchase in-house to do that work yourself. It just depends on what your budget is. Do you have the financial capabilities to purchase it? But I did want to add that in because, you know, the solution is you can outsource it, but you can also bring it in-house. And ultimately, if you find that somebody is in the process of filing your trademark and it has not been registered yet, or it has been filed, but there are silent, nobody's using it, or it is filed and it is being used, you need to get an IP lawyer on board to represent you and take counteractive action. You need to do something. If you don't want to do anything, then your strategy will ultimately be completely rebranding yourself for China. Does that mean, you know, your Latin names are completely different? Does it mean that you then create a Chinese name and you use that as your branding asset? It depends on you. But if you don't want to take action, that's the only other solution. or obviously you exit the Chinese market and you don't do anything in there. Now, I just want to emphasize here, it is your fault. If you're on this webinar, or if you're listening to this webinar, or you've been researching on China and you still haven't done this activity, you're the only one to blame for being slow and not getting it done. Nobody else's fault but yours in taking that action. Okay. But you do need an IP lawyer on board to assist you if it comes to that situation where trademarks are filed and you want to get it back. Now, tips on how to find infringing products online. And this is something you can do at your desk, or you can get a monitoring service to do this for you. And if you want to do this yourself, there are several things you can do. You can search for names which are identical or similar to your brand or product name. I would obviously use the Chinese search engines to do all of this. You can search for brand or product names in Chinese, right? Because consumers tend to want to translate brand names into Chinese. You can use a translation tool to do that. But you can use the various search engines, see what pops up. You can also go on the e-commerce platform sites, type it in and see what pops up. This is all desk research you can do yourself. Okay, you don't have to outsource that to a monitoring service. Okay. Now, another question I get is, are the Chinese platforms helping in the fight of infringement? Yes, they are. First of all, if you want to get on any of the e-commerce platforms, you have to show a trademark certificate that you own the trademark. That is their one step to prevent any form of liability on their end. They're doing their preparation to make sure you registered your brand names and your brand assets. And the other is that, you could have existing providers on these e-commerce platforms, or even new ones that know how to bypass and loophole the system. But there are hotlines that are also in English, as well as I believe Korean and Japanese, that can help you to fight infringement on these platforms. Okay, I've just listed a couple here, but almost every social media and e-commerce platform has a trademark infringement team, and they have a hotline that you can reach out and call to be able to get information from. So yes, they are. It is obviously a difficult job because it might not be identical. It might be very similar. And then how do you evaluate the similarity and all of that type of stuff? So it gets tricky. Now, just to show you how easy it is to register your trademarks in China. First of all, you need a power of attorney to allow a local agent to submit the files on your behalf. Yes, documents need to be filed in original and submitted. You need to have, most providers will require you to fill in an order form or a registration form highlighting what brand assets there are. Is it design marks? Is it word marks? And what are the classes and subclasses? If it's design marks, then we will require a soft copy of those brand assets that are design marks in JPEG format, in black and white, or in color, depending on how you want them to get registered. And then we need a copy of the identity proof of the applicant. So whether it's a corporate entity or whether it's an individual that is owning the trademarks that are going into China. So it's either a business license or a passport copy that would be required. Not complicated. It's 4 documents. All right. Very easy. Can really be done in an hour. If not, if you want to be conservative, you could say it takes 2 hours, but not even, to get all of this up and running. All right. It really is easy peasy lemon squeezy. There's no other way of saying it. It is an administrative function that is not complicated in China. And I just want people to realize that they shouldn't be thinking about this and taking the time to think about it. They should literally just do it. Again, if you're on this webinar trying to educate yourself on how to save your brand, then this is the #1 priority you should be focusing on. So how to safeguard your brand, just to summarize this, okay? 3-step strategy. 1, register your IP rights as soon as possible. Now, today we focused on trademarks, but obviously there's also copywriting and patents. Copyright and patent applications should really be done with IP lawyers directly, as there's a technical aspect that is imposed on those. The trademark applications are very straightforward, and most corporate service providers in China do it and do it cheaper than most IP lawyers. But really for the patents and copyrights, I would go to an IP lawyer for that. And especially an IP lawyer that has experience in your sector and industry. The other is a monitoring service. Monitor the e-commerce sites, the social media sites, the search engines. This is something that should be continuously done to make sure that nobody is tarnishing your brand in China, okay? And nobody is stealing it. The other thing I want to emphasize, which is point number 3, is if you are in the service sector, if you are in a product sector, you're producing products and you're selling products, it's requesting the takedowns of counterfeit or infringing goods. So some people might just do steps 1 and 2, and then when they actually see that somebody has taken their brand and is counterfeiting or infringing, they don't do anything about it most of the time because they don't know what to do. You can call the police. You can also call your IP lawyer who handles that. But it is important that you take things all the way through. All right. If you're already spending money on registering your IP, and number 2, monitoring the e-commerce sites, social media sites, etc., then follow through and make sure you do the takedowns as well. You want to get these people off the market, right? And if they're doing it with your products, they're going to continue to do it with your products. And then, it's always going to be in your back of mind, how are they tarnishing your brand? What are they saying on social media, etc.? So make sure you really follow through with all of the actions. Now, I just want to highlight 2 case studies, which is something that just has the tendency of happening as you go into China. The first is a German lock company. This is why there's the photo of the lock. Now, they came into China 30 years ago, and life 30 years ago was really the wild, wild west. So I don't fault them. I think the key with this case study is I want people to learn from this case study of what not to do now, some 30 years later, where China is open and you have more control over everything you do in China, over the business you're creating in China. And it's the following. This company 30 years ago gave exclusive rights to their distributor to register their trademark in China, which means the distributor in China owned all of the brand assets. And about 15 to 20 years later, this company wanted to go on its own and eliminate the distributor out of the supply chain. And of course, they had leverage because they owned the brand assets. And they lost face with the fact that this company wanted to do it on their own. So you can't imagine the value that they put on selling those brand assets, but also then the legal trouble that followed. So I want everybody to know that you can own your brand assets going into China. You don't have to give them to anybody. You can set up licensing fees if you want, but you don't have to give the ownership to anybody. You can maintain that ownership and understand that don't relinquish that control. I am a bit of a control freak in terms of China and relinquishing certain things. Evaluate the worth of your brand. And if it is very important to you, learn from this lesson of taking control over it, okay? And making sure you are the owner over it. The next one I want to make people aware of is that everyone who is doing business with or in China should be registering their IP, okay? I have had more than just one. I've had numerous companies who are producing in China say, we don't need to register our trademarks, Christina, because all we're doing is outsourcing the manufacturing to third parties. And we're not selling in the Chinese market. We're just doing 100% export. We don't need to register our IP in China. Okay. It's false. Why? Well, in this situation, this was a European brand, really moving to creating a global brand outside of Asia. And they had, I don't know, between 80 to 100 different suppliers in China and expanding that supplier network to Southeast Asia as well. They decided to end the contract with one supplier who completely lost face. And as a revenge tactic, ended up going to register their brand assets with the China Trademark Office. But not just registering with the China Trademark Office, they followed through and also registered the trademarks with the customs. So if you are in the business of export and import, you should not just be registering your brand with a CTMO, you should be registering your brands also with the customs and making sure you follow through with all of that. Now, in this situation, this supplier registered the brand assets. The minute that it got registered at the Customs Bureau, it was flagged. All exports that were going through with that brand name on it were being flagged as infringed products. Okay, which meant that they couldn't export anything. It was being stuck at customs. They had to go through legal proceedings that lasted over four or 5 months. And their only solution was on the products that didn't have the brand imprinted on the product itself. They used plain cartons to get the products out and did repackaging in Europe, which you can imagine for 4 to 5 months cost them quite a hefty amount in their supply chain. But it was the only solution they had. And then those that had the logo imprinted on the products couldn't get the products out. So this is where definitely you need your IP lawyer on speed dial. And it just shows that regardless of what you're doing in China, you need to register your trademarks. Okay, that's why I've said here, preemption by action is the best form of protection. And again, getting ahead of that growth opportunity. What do you need to do? You need to prepare yourself. You need to know the ins and outs of all of this. You need to educate yourself on all of this, so you're aware of what your actual to-do list is and action plan is to get ahead of that growth opportunity. So the importance of protecting your brand is that you want to use it in China. You want to clear customs and trade with your brand assets on cartons and labels and products. You want to provide services in China with your brand assets as well. By registering your IP, nobody can take it away from you. You have full ownership and control. And last but not least, if you do plan on having an entity in China, it is one of the simplest ways of developing repatriation strategies to get your money out of China through trademark licensing agreements, as an example. This is why I recommend not that the Chinese entity owns those brand assets, but that they're owned by an overseas entity in order to be able to repatriate funds out. And we can go into more explanations of that if you've got any questions on that. So I would love, that's the end of today's presentation on how to save your brand in China. Again, I'm a big believer that if you take your time in taking this action, you're the only one at fault if somebody takes it away from you. So I would love to hear from everybody that's watching this live, everybody that is watching this on replay. What was your biggest takeaway from today? I hope if you haven't registered your trademarks, it is to register them immediately. But otherwise, any keywords you want to highlight, that would be fantastic. How you can work with Woodburn, how you can work with me is we help with brand advisory. We do trademark search and registrations, and we also set up repatriation strategies for via licensing agreements if you have your own entities in China. So that's what we do around all the brand assets work. All right, if you've got no questions have popped in, I've realized. I guess everything was very transparent and clear. If you do have any questions, you can insert them into the chat box. I'll be hanging around. And if you're interested in registering your trademarks in China, or you just want to have a quick strategy session about China, you can email me at Christina@woodburnglobal.com. I'll just write my email in the chat box so you all have it. You can copy and paste it. There you go. And don't forget to, don't forget to sign up for our next webinars. So as I said earlier, tomorrow's session is going to be about incorporation in China, Wednesday about how to communicate with your Chinese accountant, Thursday about hiring your first hires, and then we're going to be talking about corporate management structures on Friday. So if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Rachel, Esther, thank you so much for joining. Lovely to have you on. And I hope to see you all again very soon. Oh, Philip had a question. Are trademarks in China registered under the Madrid Protocol? Yes, they are, Philip. But the tendency, and this is something that I've debated with a lot of IP lawyers in China about, and the consensus is the following. You can register your marks under the Madrid Protocol for China. However, when it comes into infringement, the tendency that the lawyers say is that it is better if you would have individually registered them directly in China versus under the Madrid Protocol. Now, I'm not an IP lawyer specifically, and I don't know the reasoning and understanding around that. But that is the one thing that they always say, which is also then why I'm recommending people to register it directly versus using the Madrid Protocol. Because you just never know if you're going to get into an infringement case or, being sued or whatnot. I hope that answers your question, Philip. Esther, in terms of length of time of registering the trademark, so currently, it really varies. Currently, if you do the search ahead of time and you have an idea of the success rate, it can take anywhere between 9 to 12 months for the trademark registration to be completed. Usually at the 7 to 9 month time frame, the trademarks will be registered in a directory for a period of 3 months, and then the trademark certificate will be issued thereafter. So you're looking at a time frame of about 12 months on average. Could take a little bit longer as well. Keep in mind that once you've done a trademark registration in China, they're valid for 10 years. And about 6 months prior to the renewal date, to the end of term date, you have to renew. And also just coming up with dates. If there are IP hijackers and IP squatters who take the brand assets and register them, and you realize that, and you're in no rush to get into the market, then you can actually wait 3 years. And if you have proof to show that they've never used it on any platforms, whether it's websites or social media platforms, then you can actually file with the CTMO, the China Trademark Office, to get that trademark to become yours. And if you have, because this is also just a new case that's popped up on my lap, if you have somebody who has actually had their trademark been taken by someone and the 10-year period has lapsed, you have 1 year from the date of lapsing of that period to be able to register. So there's 1 year where nobody can do any forms of registration, and then you can do the registration. So it's a little bit of the intricacies around it. I hope that's helped. Nothing else has popped in. Any other questions, please do let me know. In the meantime, I'll stop the recording. I'll hang out for 1 or 2 minutes, and I hope to see you in our future webinars this week. Take care and goodbye.